This week, we're making a ring, and it is a blast to make. Let's go. Hello everybody, welcome to another tutorial. I'm Jim McIntosh, and today the project we're going to do is a ring. And this is a great ring. It's a great ring for you to give away as gifts to friends. You can wear it yourself. I even sell these at arts and crafts shows when we do them. So they're really a lot of fun. They're very simple to make, and they don't take very much time. So it's a great project, and we're going to show you a couple of different ways to make it. So if you're ready, let's head over to the bench and I'll show you what we're going to make. Let's go. So this is what we're going to be making. We're going to be making this very simple lasso ring. Now this particular one actually is my wife's ring. She's been wearing it for several years now, and I made it for her a while ago. She's still wearing it, so these hold up really well. This particular one is done in 16 gauge round wire, and that's fine. You can use 16 gauge if you want. These hold up better, but 18 gauge seems to be something that more people have, so that's what we're going to use today in this project. But I also wanted to show you one other ring, and this is basically the same thing, same lasso, same design, same everything, except for I added a bead to it. And all I did was I took a thin piece of 20 gauge round wire and I wound it around the end right here a couple of times and set it into place. I then wrapped it inside of this wrap here, and then if you look underneath, I just took the excess wire from that 20 gauge round wire that is holding this bead. I put it up against the wrap just to lock it into place, trimmed it short, filed it a little bit, and it adds a whole new look to the piece. I've also done the same thing where I've taken that same 20 gauge wire, I've put it in the center, brought it to the middle, and I made a post. So I bent the post up and I put a half drilled bead in there. But the one we are going to make is this one, and this one seems to be the most popular because it's got such a different look to it. And there's lots of things that you can do. You don't have to make this round. You can make a square end, a triangle, anything you can think of. You can come up with some really nice free-forming designs for this. Okay, this is just the simplest one to do. This is the starting point that we're going to use. So play around with this and have some fun with it, okay? We're also going to be doing some texturing to it a little bit, but this is the final piece that we're going to be doing. So let's get started, and we'll talk about the materials next. Now, the materials for this couldn't get much simpler. We've got an 8-inch piece of 18 gauge round wire. Now I'm using sterling silver. You can use whatever wire that you'd like to use, but this is 18 gauge. 16 gauge works really well also. I have made this with square wire. The only problem with square wire is you got to be careful that the wire doesn't roll on you as you move it around and curve it around your ring mandrel. The other thing we'll need is a 5-inch piece of 22 gauge half round, half hard wrap wire. Now again, you know me, I like to make sure I know where the flat side is because that's going to be the side up against the metal, up against the wire that we're going to be wrapping. So I always leave it in a curve when it comes off of the spool or off of the bundle that I get it off of. And I keep it like this, curved, so I know that this inside of the curve is the flat side. The outside of the curve is the domed side or the half round side, okay? That's it. Let's talk about tools. For this project, the tools, just like the materials, very simple things we're going to be using. In order to cut the wire, you'll need wire cutters. We'll be using flat nose pliers as we shape. You're going to need a ring mandrel. Now, it's not necessary that you get a steel one. You could get a wooden one. You could also use a wooden dowel. You don't want to use anything plastic. Plastic is hollow. The plastic ring mandrels are hollow. You can't do any hammering up against it, shaping like we're going to be doing. I prefer a steel ring mandrel because this is held up really well. You can look at all the wear and tear it's taken. I've had this for many years. I've used it thousands of times as far as I can remember, and it still holds up really well. So a good steel ring mandrel is a good investment on this, okay? You'll also need a rawhide mallet. My ring mandrel wants to roll away. There we go. You'll need a rawhide mallet. This helps shape the ring without flattening it, okay? You might need some chain nose pliers to get in and move some of this finer wire. We may or may not use this. You'll need some painter's tape. This is our best friend. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I love painter's tape because I like it to hold things together so I can work on it. And of course, you know my pet peeve, I gotta have scissors to cut this tape off. So I keep those around. You're going to need a needle file that's got a flat face on it. We'll use that to kind of round off any rough edges so that they don't cut anybody. We want to make our ring as safe as possible. Now let me show you a couple of other tools that we may or may not want to use. You may or may not have one of these. This is a chasing hammer. It's got this nice wide flat side on it. This will flatten wire. This can texture wire. And we use that in conjunction with our bench block. Now I have my bench block just on a piece of folded up cloth so it dampens the sound as I'm hitting things. It will dampen it. I'm going to show you how to use these, but you don't need them for this project, okay? It's an optional tool. So that should be all the tools we need. Oh, one more thing, we also need something to measure with, just so that we can cut and measure and cut our wire. So I wasn't sure if I had mentioned that, but we do need something to measure with. That's it. Let's move on to the project. Here we go. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to begin by making the lasso, this round section here. And what I want you to do is I want you to find the center of your wire. Approximate center should be right somewhere around in that neighborhood. And I want you to take your ring mandrel and I want you to hold it at the end of your ring mandrel and hold that there in the center, approximate center, with your thumb. And then bring both sides around the ring mandrel. So we do this one at a time, bring that one around and that one around, and just kind of give it a squeeze. And then take it off your ring mandrel, and this is what you should have. You should have just this loop here at the top. Now, I try to get mine to be in the center. I'm pretty close, but let me show you the good thing about having dead soft wire is I can take and I can move this around just slightly. I didn't have to do too much to this, but I can recenter that hoop, that lasso, okay? So now that we've got this, we need to take these two arms. See, I don't have it in the center. See, I knew I didn't. Optical illusion. There we go. Now, I like to kind of give this, there we go, there we go. Now we're pretty close to the center. I give it a squeeze because I don't want this center loop to be too big. Okay, so if we compare the two together, let me show you. We're pretty close. Now we're going to make this a little bit bigger in just a second, but the next thing we need to do is we need to take the two arms that are sticking out and we need to bring them forward. So here where they cross over one another, where they intersect here at the bottom of that loop, so right here, take your flat nose pliers and grab one of the wires right at about the center of that where they come together and bend it outward. So this is what I've done to just one wire. I bent that wire out. And I'll do the same thing with the second one, but I want you to notice I'm going to grab this and I'm grabbing it right about where that first bend. So here's the end of my pliers right here. I'm going to get on camera so you can see it. but I'm grabbing it right there, and I'm going to bend this outward so that they're sitting next to each other like this. Okay, so I took the two arms, they're sticking out. These are going to become the ring shank. And now I just want to kind of clean that up. So I'm going to straighten my wires a bit. So run the wire through my fingers a few times. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these are right where I want them next to each other. So everything is nice and straight. Okay? So the other thing I personally like to do is I don't want this to be too much of a circle. Now this actually turned out pretty well. It's pretty much an oval. But what I like to normally do is I usually will just give it a couple of taps with a rawhide mallet to bring that into more of an oval, and then just fix everything again to kind of make sure it's all straight. And this one is. So let's now go on to what I would say is the optional part of this. And that is the last thing we'll do with this lasso. We're going to take our bench block. Let me readjust my light just a little bit so there's not a glare on there. We'll put our bench block down in front of us, and I want you to put the lasso in just a little tiny bit of where they intersect together on the bench block. Keep your fingertips off the bench block because you don't want to smash your fingers with your chasing hammer. And all I want to do is I want to tap around this circle and flatten it with this wide side of the chasing hammer. And I just want to give it just a slight flattening. Now we don't want this paper thin, although you could, but we don't want to really make it paper thin. This will make this very hard. This loop is now really hard because we have hardened it using a chasing hammer. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to take the ball peen side of the hammer, and we want to just tap around that ring again and make little divots in it. These little bumps in the wire. And I'll show you in just a second. Almost done. I do this until I'm kind of happy with how many little divots are on there. There, I think that, yeah. So let's set everything aside and I'll show you what we've got. Let's bring our light back in. Now, we've got these nice little marks in there. We've textured this, and if you move this around in the light, you notice that it reflects the light differently, and that just gives us a nice little bit of texture to this and adds some character to the piece. Now that's optional. You do not have to do that. If you decided you don't want to do that, let's move on to the very next thing. And this is the final thing we're going to do with this, is we're going to place the loop on our ring mandrel in about a size 7. Now, why do I say a 7? Because that's the size of a ring I'm making. So if I was making a 6, I would move this up to a 6. But I put this on a size 7, and I want to just give it a little curve, because what I want to do is I want to shape this on here so that it conforms to somebody's finger. Now, I hold it in place also, and I will tap the end. And let me show you what we got. So let's set my ring mandrel aside. And if you look at it from the side view, it's got a curve in it now. That's because we want it to fit on somebody's finger nice and smoothly. So that's all we're going to do with the lasso part. Let's now move on to the ring shank itself. Okay, here we go. So this is what we have so far. We've got this loop done here. Now remember, we added a bead to this particular one. Now, before moving on to this next section is when you would do that. So all you would need to do is just wrap a 20 gauge round wire around this end, feed it onto the bead, and then set it in between the two sections of the ring shank. Okay, and that's that's all you would do. And then the next step we're going to do is we're going to wrap the ring shank. So I take a piece of painter's tape and I make my little flag just to hold these two guys firmly in place because I don't want it getting away from me. So if you do have that wire coming through the center of these two, you're going to want to put this tape around that as well. Okay? So now we're going to take our wrap wire and we're going to start our wrap. So we'll hold this about a 1/2 inch from the end. I'm going to hold this slightly in because we're using 18 gauge wire. And I'm going to take the long end. I'm going to bring it up over the tool. Here's my check mark. So we can take it off of the tool now. And notice that I flip this over because we want to wrap on the inside of the ring. So I'm working with the inside of the ring. So I'm going to hang my wrap wire right where the two come together. And I'm going to hold it firmly in place. Now this is round wire, and round wire can be squirrely when trying to wrap it. So this takes a little bit of doing. Patience, please. Patience, everyone. But I'm starting my wrap. So I'm going to wrap this 8 times. So there's 1. See, it's already wanting to move on me. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Here's number 4. So after 4, I like to set it in place. I'm going to move it up a little bit. And I want to show you something. Notice this first wrap is kind of out of place. It's not even with the rest. So I undo it a little bit and then I pull it back in so it's even with the rest. So we've got 4. So let's add 4 more. So 5, 6, 7. There's number 8. And we're going to finish both of them on the inside of the ring. Let's flatten those down a little bit, squeeze them against the ring shank. Now we can trim off our excess wire with wire cutters. So there's 1, and I'm going to cut this so that it comes to about the middle of these 2 wires. So that's where I'm cutting these ends so that it will sit against this smoothly. And we'll knock them down just a little bit. Okay, there's the wrap that we have here. The only other thing I like to do is, again, I like to bring in my bench block. And this is a personal thing, so this is not something you have to do, but I actually like to take my Rawhide Mallet, and I like to set this wrap against it. I want it to be nice and firm. I don't want it to go away. So I just put the inside, this is the cut side, against the bench block, took my took my Rawhide Mallet, hammered it a few times just to make sure that it's firmly in place. And that's all I did on there. Again, that's totally not needed unless you want to. Okay, so now you should be able to take the tape off. And this ring shank is held firmly in place. So now all we need to do is turn this into a ring. But let me tell you what I do. Now, before I make this into this ring here, I'll make several of these in the same size, about a size 7. And I will display them when I'm doing art shows. And I will display them. And people will come up and they will... See, this is how insidious that tape is. It's everywhere now. Okay. So I will put these on my display. And people will try them on. And they'll say, oh, I really like this, but it doesn't fit. I keep several of these behind my table, just like this. And then I will make these to size. I'll tell them, oh, I can make that to size right here while you wait. If you've got 5 minutes, let me make one for you. And I take out my ring sizer. So I've got my my ring sizer. These are a great little tool to have. They come in plastic as well, but I bought some aluminum ones. Find out what their ring size is. And then I make it for them on the spot, because from this point on, we're 5 minutes tops from done. Even though on the video it may take a little longer because I'm explaining it, but if you were sitting down and just making this, we're talking 5 minutes from this point on. Okay, so that's a great way of showing people that you're a craftsman. People get excited when they see you making a piece right before their eyes, and they really enjoy it, and it's more precious to them as well. It's something that they were like, oh, this guy made this for me while I stood there. It was so awesome. Great way to really get some publicity for your work. Okay, so let's make this into a ring shank. Making the ring shank for this is really rather simple. So I told you I was going to make this into a size 7. I've made these in size 7 for many, many years. So take the lasso part, and I want you to put it over a size 7. And I want you to hold it there with your thumb. And I want you to take the 2 shank wires that you have, and I want you to push them around the mandrel firmly against it. Okay, so this is what I've done. So if I take this off, notice it's the letter C. That's what we want. So I'll make this into my letter C. I set my ring mandrel aside just for a second, because we're going to take each of these shank wires, and I want you to put them into the center of the lasso. So here we are. So take the other one and do the same thing. Put it on in the center of the lasso. Now this isn't pretty. Okay, not pretty. Don't worry about it. We're going to pretty it up in just a minute. But the important thing is that we've got these 2 right in the middle of the lasso. Now get your ring mandrel back out. Recenter yourself on a size 7. Hold it there with your thumb against your ring mandrel. And I want you to take your flat nose pliers and grab each one of these wires one by one. I want you to pull each one firmly against the ring mandrel. Now, they may overlap one another, and that is something we want to avoid doing. So take it off your ring mandrel and fix that before we go on to anything else, because we want these to be on the correct side. Okay, there. So all I've done is I've drawn this in just a little bit, so it's getting a little prettier. So let's do that again. Let's put it back on the ring mandrel. Size 7. Push it down, push that down against it. So look at the back side. See how far we are away? So grab each one of those wires again and pull till they're snug against your ring mandrel. See, so notice, let me flip this over. See, so notice I'm getting closer to this. Now, another thing you can do is you can take your mallet and you can tap around this to help get that firmly against it. But grab it again, and now this time I want you to hold that against your ring mandrel, grab it, and I want you to bring it over the edge of this loop, the lasso. So now I am really firmly up against this. Now this takes a few minutes because you sometimes got to work this in. So bring both of them over just like that. So here we're firmly against the ring mandrel. By bending these over like that, it locks them in place. So all I've done is I brought them over that edge. Now that I have this where I want it, I really don't think I need to do too much more. I might tap this a few times just to make sure that I've got a good round ring, but it looks like I do. So I got lucky this time. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to trim this excess wire. So I'm going to take my wire cutters and I'm going to cut so that I can bend these each side, and be careful you don't cut your ring shank, but you want to trim these back just a little bit. pull this one away. There we go. So notice how long these are. Can you see that? See, these are just enough so that I can tuck this under. So let's set our ring mandrel aside. And now notice how long I did these. Now I'm probably going to trim these a little bit more because I'm going to take my flat nose pliers now. And I'm going to bend them around underneath the lasso. And I'm going to tuck them just away, just a little bit, underneath it. And this just takes just a minute to just kind of get each one of these how you want it and where you want it. And notice the ends that I put them on the outside of the ring shank as I bent these under. See, and that's all I did. So notice it's not centered. So the other thing I want to do is I kind of want to give it a squeeze and recenter this lasso part above the center of the ring. And then put it back on your ring mandrel. Back to a size 7. And then reshape it so that everything is nice and round. And another thing that happens while you're hammering this with a rawhide mallet is you're also hardening the metal. And let me just tell you how that happens. Metal, dead soft wire, the molecules are separated, about like this. Let's pretend those are a couple of molecules. They're separated. By hammering it, you're bringing those molecules closer together, and that tightens that bond. So the metal becomes harder that way. The only way that you can separate those again is to apply heat, and that's called annealing. You anneal it, in this case, to bring the malleability back. But what we want is we want to kind of get it as close to half hard as we can just by tapping this with a rawhide mallet. Okay, so check a few things now. Check to see if this needs to be trimmed more. Mine really don't. I was able to get them underneath there. I do need to straighten them out a little bit. Kind of bring them together so they look good. And we'll kind of, there we go. So that's what we ended up with. We've got a nice little ring. It's a size 7. Fits my pinky barely. And that didn't take us long at all. Okay? So let's finish up. See, wasn't that a fun ring to make? And I really make a lot of these and sell them at arts and crafts shows. As I showed you as we were making it, I would make it up to a certain point. And I keep a bunch of those behind the counter. And as people are trying them on, I'll make one right there in front of them. And they love to see you making work in front of them. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please make a lot of these. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the project. Let me know different ways that you could think of to make the project. There's a lot of different things you can do with this really simple procedure. So it's a good project to make. If you already haven't done so, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe below. And also hit the bell as well so that you get alerts as to when we put new projects out and new videos out. I try to get a video out every single week, at least one video. And you're going to want to keep up with everything, okay? Also share this video with everybody. All your friends, all your other fellow artists, share this with them. I'm sure they're going to want to they're going to want to see some of the things we're doing over here, okay? So again, my name is Jim McIntosh, and I want you to remember, practice, practice, practice.